Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in today's video, I want to walk you through that demo that I just played for you, and I want to just go through the entire thing step by step and explain the entire thought process that went into it. This lesson will include a website version, and the website version, as always, will have the written lesson with it. It will include the tabs, it will include the charts and diagrams that are used in the video, and it will have a few video backing tracks that go along with it, displaying, one will have the pentatonic scale displayed on the screen, one will have the diatonic scale displayed on the screen, and one will have the diatonic scale with the chord tones lighting up on the screen as the chords change. So that's everything that's going to go along with the website version of this lesson. But here in this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire solo start to finish. So let's get into it. All right, so there's going to be three parts to this lesson, and those three things are: number one, the key signature; number two, the key scale; number three, chord tone targeting. Those three things are the fundamentals. All right, you understand those three things, you can create your own solos, you can learn other people's solos by ear in a pretty short amount of time, you can learn most songs by ear. This is the fundamentals of music right here: key signatures, the key scale, chord tone targeting, those three things. All right, so in order to determine the key signature, you just look at all of the chords that are being used in the progression, and then you turn to the circle of fifths, and then you determine which grouping of six the chords fall into. Or if you're the one writing the chord progression, which is the case here, then you just kind of start playing some chords together. More often than not, the chords that seem to go together, the chords that tend to work together, are all going to be part of the same key. That's not true 100% of the time, but most of the time you're going to find that when chords seem to work together, it's because they're in the same key signature as one another. So let me just kind of show you how I came up with this. So I just grabbed a chord, a bar chord that was rooted on the A string. I like playing minor chords that are rooted on the A string. I just like that shape. Now I could have played this anywhere. I just happened to choose the 4th fret. Why did I choose the 4th fret? I don't know. That's just the one I played. So I just started noodling around here with this minor chord. This happens to be a C sharp minor chord. So I just started like noodling around. And then I was like, hey, if I take my middle finger off and go like this, that sounds cool. So I started doing that. So it's like a picking pattern I always kind of tend to use, like. All right, so that's how I started this out. And I was like, all right, well, that sounds cool. Where do I go from here? And I was like, I'm just going to write this in the key of C sharp minor. Sounds like a good enough key. Why not? I just arbitrarily chose this starting point. I was like, that's the C sharp minor chord. That's going to be the key that I write this in. That's how I determined the key. From there, I have my, I can turn to my circle of fifths and look at the grouping of 6. There's going to be my 3 major and 3 minor chords for this particular key signature. So I just started playing around with some other stuff. I was like, all right, where do I go from there? Let me go to the A. All right, so that sounds cool. I'm now using the C sharp minor chord from this key, and then I'm using the A chord from this key. So I also noticed that with this A chord, this 6-string bar chord rooted on the low E string here, I noticed that if I kind of lift up my fingers and leave the high E string and the high B string open, then it sounds cool. I didn't think to myself, I want to use an A add 9 chord. I did not think that. I was just like, let me make up some music, let me play this chord, let me kind of manipulate it just to kind of add some interest to it, and then I'll figure out the theory later. And that's exactly what I did. So I was just thinking C sharp minor to A, and then I just added some variation to it. So it's got a really, really nice sound to it. And, so I played that chord and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm going to use that. Let's figure out the theory now. So the way that you figure out that this is an A add 9 chord, you just look at the notes that are being used in this chord, you write them down on a piece of paper, and then you say, what chord is that? And that's how you figure this out. So we have an A here, we have an E, we have an A, we have a C sharp, we have an open B string, so that's a B, and then we have an E. If you look at that and you say, what kind of chord is that? That is an A add 9 chord. All right, so you play the C sharp minor to the A major twice, and then it moves to the second part of the demo. The second part of the demo still uses chords that are part of this key signature. I use the E major chord, the B major chord, and an A major chord. So for the E, I'm doing a similar picking pattern. For the B major chord, I'm doing a similar thing that I did for the A chord already. So I'm playing the bar chord, but I'm just kind of lifting up my fingers because it sounds cool. Again, I made the music first, and then I figured out the theory second. So I wasn't like, all right, I want to use a B add 11 chord. Let me do that. I didn't think about it like that. I just thought, I'm going to use an E chord, B chord, A chord, but I just want to kind of add some color to these chords. So it's still just an E major chord, it's still just a B major chord, it's still just an A major chord at the foundation. I'm just adding color to it. That's what extensions are. You're just adding color to your triads. The triads are the foundation. That is the most important thing. So in making this manipulation to this B chord, again, I looked at the notes. I was like, all right, well, that's a B. That's an F sharp, that's a B, that's a D sharp, that's a B. So far, the first 5 strings, that's just notes from the B major chord, nothing special there. But then you're adding this note up here into the chord, this E. So I have this B major chord, and I'm adding the 11. B major, add 11. All this is we're using the 4 most common chords to use from any key signature. We're using the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 6 chord. The E major is your 1 chord of this key signature. The A major is your 4 chord. The B major is your 5 chord. You can add color to any of those chords, add your extensions, whatever. It does not change the fact that it's a 1, 4, 5, or whatever order the chords are. And then we just have this other chord, the C sharp minor chord. That's your 6 chord. So within the grouping of 6, your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 chords are always going to be exactly the same. It doesn't matter what key signature you're in. We just happen to find ourselves in the key signature of E major, which is the same key signature as C sharp minor, relative major minor pair. It doesn't matter what order the chords are. Outer circle center position is your 1 chord. Outer circle counterclockwise is your 4 chord. Outer circle clockwise is your 5 chord. Inner circle center position is your 6 chord. So this whole thing is a 6 chord to a 4 chord, 6 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4, 5, and 6 chords. Super common. There's about 9 bazillion songs out there that use just the 1, 4, 5, and 6 chords, just in different keys and stuff like that. Super common. That's that. All right, so now that we've identified the key signature, the next step is to determine the key scale. So your key scale is just your 7-note diatonic scale for the key signature that you're playing in. There's 12 possible key signatures. We've already identified the 1 key signature that we're in, the 1 of the 12 possible key signatures, which happens to be the key signature of E major, which is the same key signature as C sharp minor. E major, C sharp minor are a relative major minor pair. That means that they share all of the same notes as each other. They have the same 7-note diatonic scale as one another. They also share the same chords as one another. So all of the chords that are found in the key of E major are going to be the same chords that are found in the key of C sharp minor. So with that said, the 7-note diatonic scale for this key signature that we're in, the E major scale. You look at your 7 notes of the E major scale, Those are your 7 diatonic notes. You're going to notice that those are the same exact 7 notes as the C sharp minor scale, right? It's a relative major minor pair. So those 7 notes right there, that's your diatonic scale. So let's look at those notes spanned across the entire fretboard. So when you look at it like this, it's, if you're new to this, if you're new to soloing, new to the guitar, you're like, wow, that is crazy. That's just this crazy matrix of notes. What am I going to do with all that stuff, What you're going to do with all that stuff is any single one of those notes is going to work. Like, you can play any one of the notes that you see on the screen right here. There's only 7 notes displayed on the screen. Those 7 notes are found in multiple locations on the fretboard. But if you just stick to those 7 notes and you don't play anything other than those 7 notes, play them in any order that you want, it's going to sound good with the chord progression that you were soloing over. But as a beginner, that may be intimidating to you. So let's start small. Let's start in one little area, and then we're just going to kind of take it from there. So the thing I always like to do is I like to identify where my pentatonic position number 1 is. You find where your pentatonic position number 1 is by locating the minor scale root on the low E string with your index finger. So the minor scale root is C sharp, right? We already determined this is C sharp minor or E major. That's the key signature that we're in. So the minor scale root would be the note C sharp. Index finger on the note C sharp, right there, 9th fret. So this is your pentatonic scale. You could also locate the same pentatonic position number 1 if you were considering this to be the key of E major. So when you're trying to find your pentatonic position number 1 for a major perspective of a key signature, you take your pinky and then you put it on the root note, which in this case happens to be E. E is the major scale root. C sharp is your minor scale root. So pinky on the major scale root, there's your E right there on the 12th fret of the low E string. And again, you find the same pentatonic position. So that's your C sharp minor pentatonic scale. This is your E major pentatonic scale. So it doesn't matter which key you're playing in. You could be playing the key of D major. You could be playing in the key of A minor. You could be playing the key of E minor. It doesn't matter. You're always going to have that pentatonic position number 1 somewhere. Your pentatonic position number 1 may be here, 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 depending on which key signature that the chords from the rhythm section are in. The chords from the rhythm section here are putting us in the key of E major, which is the same key signature as C sharp minor. That puts our pentatonic position number 1 right here between frets 9 and 12. And again, we find that pentatonic position, minor scale root, index finger, put it there. Major scale root, pinky, put it there. Minor scale root, major scale root, minor scale root, major scale root. There's your pentatonic position number 1. So you're always going to have that. It's going to be the same shape regardless of what key you're playing in. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to expand from that little 4 fret range. We're going to expand and give ourselves 8 frets to work with. You can expand as much as you want. You have the entire fretboard at your disposal. But maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're only at this point where you're like, all right, I know I had this pentatonic position number 1, but I don't know what to do from there. I don't know how to play outside of that little box pattern. That's the purpose of this lower and upper extension stuff. So you have your pentatonic position number 1. Anytime you have your pentatonic position number 1, you can always find your pentatonic position number 2. It's always going to have the same shape relative to the pentatonic position number 1, and it's going to look like this. And you're going to have your pentatonic position number 5 in the direction of the headstock, and that's going to look like this. All right, so instead of using this entire pentatonic position number 1, entire pentatonic number 2, and number 5, I'm just going to take a little piece of pentatonic 5 and a piece of pentatonic 2, and that's just going to be my little diagonal soloing framework. You can use other notes if you want, nothing stopping you from using these other notes. It's just that this is how we're taking all of this matrix of notes, these 7 notes for our key scale, which is confusing to a beginner, and we're just kind of whittling it down into something that you can use, memorize, and apply relatively easily. So your pentatonic 1, your lower extension, and your upper extension. All right, so what we've done here is we've just identified where our pentatonic position number 1 is. The pentatonic scale is 5 of the 7 total notes from the overall key scale, the 7-note diatonic scale for the key that we're playing in. The pentatonic scale just uses 5 of those 7 total notes. If you just use 5 of those 7 total notes and you don't use all 7, it's going to have a certain sound to it. It's just going to have like more of a rock blues type sound. I guess that's how you might describe it. It's all part of the overall key. You're not playing any out of key stuff. You're just not utilizing the full 7-note key. People like this pentatonic scale, especially as guitar players, because it just has these shapes. It's easy to memorize these shapes, you know, like any guitar player that's been playing for a few years or more has almost definitely seen this shape. It's just an easy shape to remember. It's an easy pattern to remember, you know, and then adding this little lower extension and this upper extension to it, you're still just sticking with the same 5-note framework. It's just you're giving yourself more soloing room to play with. Now, if you only play this pentatonic scale and you only play these 5 notes and you ignore the chords completely, like you don't worry about the chords, you're only focused on the key, then that's fine. That's what I refer to as layer 1. You're soloing based on the knowledge that this is in the key of E major or this is in the key of C sharp minor. I don't care what the rhythm chords are yet. I'm not focused on that. I'm only focused on the key. So I'm just going to do a quick little noodle using my looper pedal, just running up and down this little soloing framework, you know, this pentatonic 1 plus our lower and upper extension, and it's going to more or less sound good. Ready? All the notes worked. It may not have been the most amazing solo in the world. It definitely wasn't the most amazing solo in the world, but the point is that those are the notes that you use because this is the key that we're in. Therefore, those are the notes that are going to sound good. Keeping in mind that I've only used 5 of the 7 total notes so far. You can use all 7 notes and they're going to sound good too, but stick to just those 5 notes, just the 5 pentatonic notes. It's just going to have like a specific sound to it. When you go ahead and you add in your extra 2 diatonic notes to create the full 7-note diatonic scale, it's still going to sound good. It's just that now you have more stuff to work with. You have more melodic possibilities to create for your licks and phrases and stuff. So for that demo, I just added in the diatonic notes here and here. But you could add them in wherever. Like you have the entire fretboard is yours for the taking. The 7 notes are found everywhere. But just within this little pentatonic position number 1 with the lower and upper extension added framework, I just was like, okay, I'm going to add a diatonic note there and a diatonic note there. If I wanted to add the diatonic notes on the other strings, that would have been fine too, but I was just trying to keep things simple for the purpose of the demo. So let me just kind of do the same thing I just did, and I'm just going to noodle around over that same exact progression again in my looper, but now I'm going to add the diatonic notes, and you're going to see how it has more of like a melodic feel to it. So instead of just walking up and down the pentatonic scale, I was walking up and down the diatonic scale. I was just utilizing the 7-note scale instead of just 5 of the 7 total notes, which is the pentatonic scale. So that's how you play in key. That's just the key scale. All right, so finally we have chord tone targeting. So this is where we pay attention to specific notes within the 7-note diatonic scale. You have your key. Once you have your key, you can then determine what your key scale is. Your key scale is the 7 diatonic notes that are going to sound good over the entire chord progression that you play. If you just focus on the key 100% of the time and you just run up and down the fretboard playing in key, it's going to sound good. You're going to find that your ear tends to guide you to certain notes though. What you're doing is your chord tone targeting. You may not be aware that you're chord tone targeting. You may just be improvising and noodling around in the various different scale patterns, utilizing these 7 notes from the key scale that you're playing in over the chord progression. And you're just going to be finding that like, that note doesn't sound that great, but when I move to this note, that note sounds really good. But then when the next chord comes along, you're like, that note doesn't really sound so good anymore. But if I move to here, okay, now it sounds good. That's chord tone targeting. Those certain notes that sound better than other notes within your scale on a per chord basis, that is what chord tone targeting is. So for this demo, I wasn't really doing much chord tone targeting for the first half. It was really in the second half, the part where it kicked into the E major chord, moving to the B major chord, moving to the A major chord, the 1 chord moving to the 5 chord, moving to the 4 chord. That part of the solo, that's where I started doing the chord tone targeting. And so let me just explain to you how I did that. So I started off, we're still here in our pentatonic position number 1 right here. And the chord tones for your 1 chord in your pentatonic position number 1. So we have our pentatonic position number 1. We know what our 1 chord is. Our 1 chord is the E major chord. So it doesn't matter which key you're in, it's always going to have the same shape. It's just going to be moved around on the fretboard. We just happen to be right here between frets 9 and 12. So in your pentatonic position number 1, your 1 chord is always going to have this shape to it. In the cage system, that's known as the G shape. So the note that I was targeting over the E major chord was this note right here. All right, so if I just play that note over an E major chord, it sounds good, right? Why does that sound good? Because that is a note, that is a chord tone of the E major chord. An E major chord is E, G sharp, and B. This note right here is the note G sharp. So I could have played any of these. These are all chord tones of the E major chord. I just happen to choose that one. So instead of just starting on that note, I did like a little bend. So it was like a bend, and then I was kind of like, I was approaching that note. So if you start on this note right here, it doesn't really sound that good. But what I was trying to do is I was trying to start on that note. So you're like approaching the note. So it's tension slowly being released. So your ear wants it to end on that note, you know, because that's the chord tone. That's the that's just the resolution of the tension. Your ear doesn't want it to stay on this note too long. Tension, release. So it's like you're releasing the tension. That's the best way I can describe it. It's just like a little bit of flavor. I could have just started on that note, but I just added a little bit of, you know, just a little style to it. And then I walked down to the next chord tone of the next chord. So the chord progression is an E major chord to a B major chord. B major chord is your 5 chord. The chord tones that make up a B major chord are B and F sharp and D sharp. Those are your chord tones. So I came down to here. This was the note I targeted over the B major chord. So that happens to be the note D sharp. I could have also just kind of recognized, like, oh, here's a B major chord here. You probably have seen that as a basic bar chord. So just knowing right there's a chord tone of this B major chord. So I started, this was my first chord tone over the E major. This was the chord tone I was aiming for over the B chord. And that's exactly where I landed. Then I targeted this note right here. That's the note C sharp. The notes that make up an A major chord are the notes A, C sharp, and E. If you look at this A major bar chord right here, you you can see that note right there. That's a chord tone of this A major chord. So if I just played the chord tones, I just went like this. See, I'm just kind of, I have my destinations. The path from destination 1 to destination 2 is the key scale. I could have did it like this. You know, there's several different ways to get from point A to point B on the guitar, but you just know your destinations. Chord tone of the E, chord tone of the B, chord tone of the A. How do you get from destination 1 to destination 2 to destination 3? You use the diatonic scale notes as your surrounding notes. So you have your target notes, and then you have your 7-note diatonic framework. Those are the notes that you use to kind of fill in the rest. And that's just how I came up with that. All right, so that's the little added flavor I added to the chord tone, chord tone, chord tone. So the A major chord, it's holding out for twice as long as the rest of the chords. So you have E for a bar, to a B for a bar, to an A. So the A is holding out for twice as long. So that's where I was like, all right, I'm just going to kind of just overemphasize this A major chord now. So I did that by using cage shapes. So the cage system is a great way to identify chord tones. So that's really the main goal of the cage system. The cage system is like I want to know where all the A's, all the C sharps, and all the E's are on the entire fretboard. How do I do that? The cage system is a great way to do it. So this is the E shape for your A major chord, otherwise known as just a regular 6-string bar chord rooted on the low E string. If you want to call it by its cage name, if you want to call it by just its bar chord name, whatever you want to call it, that's what it is. What I'm playing right there when I'm playing that chord is I'm playing the notes A, C sharp, and E. So all of these are chord tones of the A major chord. So that's a shape. You can move a little bit further up the fretboard. You can then play your D shape of this A major chord. It always goes in order, C, A, G, E, D, C, A, G, E, D. So if we're on E here, what's the next shape? D. So the next shape for the A major chord is going to be a D shape. So here's your chord tones of the A major chord. The next shape is going to be a C shape. E, D, C. All right, so here's a C shape for the A major chord. Next shape is going to be the A shape, C, A, G, E. So it always goes in that order, C, A, G, E, D. So we started on the E shape, E, D, C, A, G, E, D. So all I did over that A major chord was I just chose, various cage shapes. I started out with this shape, and then I moved up to the D shape and I played these notes. And then I moved up to the A shape and I played these notes. And then I moved up to the E shape again and played these notes. A's, C sharps, and E's are everywhere on the neck of the guitar. The cage system just helps you to find those A's, C sharps, and E's. So after I got done doing that, and I ended on this note right here, again, that's a chord tone of the E major chord because that's where the progression starts back over again. So you're going to notice that that note right there sounds really good over an E major chord. Why does that sound good? Because that's the note G sharp. What are the notes of an E major chord? E, G sharp, B. So I was already up there. Why did I choose that note? I mean, I could have chose any E, G sharp, or B anywhere in the entire neck of the guitar. It's just that I did that little run over the A chord, and it was right there. It was right underneath my fingers. Chord tones are always right underneath your fingertips. It doesn't matter where you're playing or what pattern you're using. chord tones are always right underneath your fingertips. I just happened to be here, so I was like, oh, there you go. There's a G sharp. So that's the note that I aimed for over that E major chord. So the chord tone targeting here was, I did this note over the E major chord, and then I did this note over the B major chord, and then I did this note over the A major chord. So... and instead of just kind of just playing the chord tones like that, I did something like... again, the surrounding notes are just coming from the scale. And then I just ended this off, the very last chord before it goes back around to the C sharp minor part. Again, it was on that A chord. So I did one of those add 9 arpeggios. I did a video about that last week. It's that melodic arpeggios video. So that's where you do the 1, 2, 3, 5 thing. So if you're on your A, here's your A right here, 12th fret of the A string. So you can go 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. That's that add 9 arpeggio that we talked about last week. And then 1, 2, 3. So instead of just going 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, I kind of 1, 2, 3, 5, and then I went backwards. So I did that little arpeggio over that A chord, timed it out so that I would land on this note here. And that is a chord tone of the C sharp minor chord, because that's how the progression starts back over. All right, so that's pretty much it. That's the entire solo. So I wrote the chord progression. After writing the chord progression, I said, okay, what key is this chord progression in? What key are we playing in now? We've identified the key signature as either E major or C sharp minor. It's a relative major-minor pair. They share the same notes. They share the same chords. They share the same fretboard patterns as one another. They are the same key signature. So we identified the key signature. Once you identify the key signature, then you figure out what your 7-note diatonic scale is. The 7-note diatonic scale gives you the 7 notes for the key that you're playing in. You find your pentatonic position number 1, so you know where you're at on the fretboard. That's my favorite reference position to use. That's a lot of guitar players' favorite reference position to use, pentatonic position number 1. You find that by putting your index finger on the minor scale root, which is C sharp, or putting your pinky finger on the major scale root, which is the note E, on the low E string. So that's how we found our pentatonic position number 1. Add in your extra 2 diatonic notes so you get the full 7-note scale to play with. You have the full melodic possibilities to use. And then the next thing is just chord tone targeting. So focusing on the key is very, very good. You want to be able to play in key. You want to know how to, playing in key is a very, very important skill to have. But at some point, you're going to want to start focusing on those chords that you're soloing over. And that's where you just focus on certain notes within your 7-note diatonic scale. You have your 7 notes. 3 out of those 7 notes are going to sound great over one chord. A different 3 out of those 7 notes are going to sound great over another chord. A different 3 of those 7 notes are going to sound great over another chord. That's how chord tone targeting works. This video is long enough. We're going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.